Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. Welcome to a beautiful football Saturday. Week 6, coast-to-coast college football pregame show. I'm your host, Uncle Shally. As always, top left corner, Buckeye brother from another mother. Looks like he got a haircut. Mr. Cottrell Simpson. How are you, sir?
I'm feeling good, man. Got to wait all day to see the Buckeyes play, but we got a decent slate that'll help me get there. So definitely looking forward to it.
We got a sneaky good slate of games today. We do. We definitely do. We got some intriguing games. I do not have to wait till 7:30 tonight, which is nice. Play at noon, get it out of the way, and enjoy the rest of my day and get ready for those SEC games later. But before we get to all that, top right corner, Mr. New Shades, Mr. West Coast, Mr. Pac-12, Mr. Alex Elmore. How are you, sir?
Well, I just beat the brakes off of Penn State in a whiteout. So I feel pretty dang good this Saturday. Guess what? We got a bye this week, so I get to ride this high for a whole nother week. And I get to ride this wave right into another ranked matchup next week against Indiana at home. So this is as good as it gets for me. Undefeated, number two team in the country. And Cottrell didn't get a new haircut, y'all. He just ripped all of his hair out while stressing, thinking that the Ducks were going to be the number 1 team in the country this year. And I thought so too. So he was ripping his hair out. He just had to cut the rest of it so it looked even. I get it, Cottrell. I get it. But, hey, biggest win of the season by any team by far, Oregon Ducks on the road at Penn State. And I'm just excited to be here.
Beating the brakes off somebody, you might need to look up the definition of that. But
yeah,
we dominated that game start to finish.
I've never seen a team beat the brakes off somebody and win in double overtime. Like I didn't even know such a thing.
If you watch the game, you would know we dominated that game from start to finish. A little bit of last gas from Penn State and James Franklin in that fourth quarter to get the game tied to go to overtime. But I was never in doubt. Let's just say, first Ohio State and Oregon game last year.
See,
I had no doubt.
Gene's already in there. Birthday boy is already in there. Beat the brakes hardly. He knows.
Whatever, Gene.
I'm proud of Gene. Gene's sticking with Penn State. I'm proud of him.
What about the Rose Bowl? That's not what you want to talk about.
No, I said last year's first matchup with Ohio State, I was not nervous. Rose Bowl, I was nervous. Whiteout, I was never nervous, not even once during the game. Even when it was tied,
Alex
I still knew we were going to win.
Alex is such a liar.
No, it's good, man.
It's too early to do drugs, Alex.
Penn State scores first in OT, and he's talking about I was never nervous.
I wasn't. Drew Aller was their quarterback. I had Dante Moore.
And you let them score first. You let them score first in OT.
Because we wanted to break their hearts even more. What happened in double OT? What happened in double OT, though? Drew Allard. That's what happened.
I just like that. I like the fact that, like, part of me really believes that Alex sits there and he goes, you know what? They're over on the sideline being like, you know what? Let them score. We're going to break their heart even more in double overtime.
They are.
Like, they're not out there trying to stop from scoring. But anyway, listen, Penn State, Oregon, we're going to get into it. It's a big game to break down. I'm sure Alex has lots of opinions on it, as you can already hear. We got lots to get into. Break the huddle. We got recaps, which will apparently be very spirited. We got to go to the grill. And we got a couple previews and pick them and Eliminator before we get out here at noon. So, Alex, put your Oregon stuff aside for now and get us going.
Shotgun. DC right. Flip 90 dig. On the center. Ready?
All right. So welcome to Break the Huddle. We start every week with this, and this week is no different. Got a couple topics to talk about. A couple of them may get into a little bit. Oh, wait. This is not even the right one. This isn't even the right. This is week 4. What is week 4 doing up there? Hold on, y'all. I got you. This is how you know the show is live. We make mistakes. We keep it in there. Give me 1 second. I got you. I don't know.
I just wanted to come on and talk about Oregon Penn State.
Hey, man, that's all I can think about. Is this it?
No, that's not it.
That's not it either, but it's marked as what it should be. Okay. Well, anyway, we're going to be talking about a couple things here on Break the Huddle while I get the graphic up. On my computer's trying to update on me. Man, it's too early for me. It's too early for the computer. Ducks, like I said, they have a bye week this week, so my head is not in college football right now because I'm just relaxing from last week's win. But we're going to start out with some news out of Colorado. Colorado was fined $50,000 this last week for chanting "FU Mormons" in the stands during the Colorado BYU game. So Colorado is now getting $50,000 in fines. This does kind of surprise me, especially with the way that the country is in right now. Like chanting explicits about a certain religions seems a bit out there. What's your guys' opinions on this?
I mean, for me, I would say it's kind of surprising. $50K is a lot for students essentially being on their own accord. It's not like it was getting put on the Jumbotron, like, this has to be the chant, things like that. Like, I mean, students are going to say or chant whatever they please. I mean, especially if it gets picked up. These kids are probably anywhere between 18 to 21, probably drunk out of their minds. Like, they're going to do and say whatever they want to. I do think it's crazy that they find them. As long as Colorado had did everything in the stadium that they were supposed to, like if they put up a message on the Jumbotron and was like, hey, like, let's stop this chant, then I feel like the school really shouldn't be at fault there for that. Should the students say it? No, but at the same time, like, again, similar to what we talked about with the field storming, you're not going to be able to control 60,000 kids from just saying whatever they want to say.
There we go.
Yeah, so this is tough, and it's weird. I mean, from my recollections, the first time we've seen it in college football, we've seen this in college basketball before, where schools have been fined or reprimanded for chants that go on during a game. I can't remember an instance where it's happened in a football game. I guess in today's day of age where everybody is hypercritical and sensitive to certain things, I get it. At the same time, to Cottrell's point, you're not really going to be able, there's no way you could stop 30,000 18 to 20-year-old kids from doing a chant. If it starts and gets going and it gets picked up, by the broadcast, I would say it's unfortunate. But at the same time, I don't know how you think you're going to stop it. You can't tell the kids come in, they can come in, they can't make noise. Like, I don't know how you expect to, curb this. I guess if you're Colorado, you would wish they would chant something different, I guess. But at the same time, for me, I think it's a lot about the conference being like, hey, we find them. We took a stand on it. We told them it's wrong. We told them they were bad. What else do you want us to do? And they at least get to save the publicity part of it, saying, hey, like, we punished them is to the maximum we were allowed to. I don't think Colorado cares. I don't, I'm sure there's definitely people out there that care what was chanted. And you have every right to be, but at the same time, it's a college football game. I mean, it's like one of those things where like people take their kids to games and expect not to hear cursing or something. Like, you kind of have to know where you are. I'm not saying that makes it right, but at the same time, you can't be like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened at the same time too. So,
and the other thing too is that Mormons isn't like a slur or like a mean word. Like, that's just describing who they are. Like at BYU, like a lot of people at BYU are Mormon. Like, so I don't know where.
But they're not all Mormon, Cottrell. They're not all Mormon. So they're really only talking like 80% of the team, which is really just not creative on the Colorado student section's behalf. If anything, y'all should be like, hug the Mormons. Y'all need to pass something around that's going to have like, let's have a word that means the F word, but we're going to chant it so it sounds nice so we don't get fined, but we all know what it means. Like, come on, y'all. We used to do this in the student section in high school. For basketball games, we would substitute words for another word so it sounded like it was pleasant, but we all knew what it meant. Like, y'all need to get together, get a group, find something more creative, because this is not original by any stretch of the imagination. All right, but we're not going to spend too much time on this. We got a $50,000 fine heading to Colorado for this incident. Obviously, I've never heard of this happening in my entire time as a college football fan, and hopefully we don't again. Deion Sanders came out and completely was like, this is not how we like to represent ourselves at Colorado. He was really upset with it. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. Obviously, they won't play again this year unless they happen to be in a bowl game or something like that. But definitely not cool on Colorado University's part. $50,000 fine, definitely deserved.
I will say this though: you talk about 50,000 well spent. I know it's not one of our topics for the week, but I feel like this is a great spot to throw it in there. Compared to what Colorado did, Virginia got fined $50,000 for the greatest field storming of all time.
Oh,
so I mean, that's money well spent right there. If I'm Colorado, I'm pissed. I'm like, we could have spent $50,000 on that, but you guys are just saying some dumb shit, and now we get to spend this $50,000. Like, I mean, talk about money not being well spent in comparison.
Just speaking of that, like we'll take a second here for that field storm. Man, that is a player safety issue. I mean, there was what was it like? It was like 10,000 people were on the field before the game even ended.
The guy was still juggling the ball.
Yeah, like I mean, like there was a very debatable catch on the other side of the end zone, one or two plays before that I thought could have gone either way, and then obviously you have the fourth down play in the end zone. Pass gets broken up, and then the field just storms as if the freaking waterways gave way, and they just stormed the field. And I was thinking that who was the wide receiver after Squirrel White? I think it was.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to get like trampled. I thought all the players on the ground, I thought they were going to be in big trouble. So I'm honestly surprised nobody did get hurt, or at least there's no reports of anybody getting hurt during that field storm. But that was definitely one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
And I will say that is the example that the NCAA does not want.
For sure.
That is the stuff they are trying to get away from with this in general. We've seen a couple of the other ones already this year. They've been a little bit more organized. Me and Cutrell were texting while it was going on. There was literally kids over the wall down on the ground before that play even started. So it wasn't contained very well from Virginia's side at all. And again, that is the situation where you run into where people do get hurt. And that is, again, let the kids get off the field, players and coaches and stuff. And then again, you can't stop the kids anyway. So let them do it. But that is, when they're talking about this next year at the NCAA meetings, this is the example they're going to use. Be like, let's not do this again.
And it's so crazy because with it happening as fast as it did, like that's clearly like if field storming gets banned, like this is going to be the highlight example of why it needs to be banned. But again, though, even with that said, that's the greatest field storming I've ever seen. Like it was literally so instant, and it literally was from every direction. All these people were on the field immediately. I'm glad no one got hurt. So we're just talking about hypotheticals here. It was awesome. I think that is a 50,000 well spent if you're Virginia, because that's going to be around for forever. But yes, player safety definitely a concern there. But just another instance where field storming, it feels like we're talking about some variation of it every week at this time here. So, but just something I want to bring up here real quick, since we're just talking about spending $50K in the blink of an eye there.
Well, no, hey, just like you said, Virginia thinks that that's a very well spent $50K, and that $50K field storm earned them a top spot in the top 25, which is a perfect segue to our next topic, which let's take a look at the college football week 6 top 25 polls. Let's give our opinions on them. Tell everyone what we think. Virginia obviously cracked the polls. I don't remember the last time a Virginia football team was ranked. Do you guys? Like, it's been a while.
I would tell you early 2000s, they were good pretty consistently. Not like top 10 team or anything like that, but they were always hovering. They were always hovering at the bottom. They've had a really good couple teams back in the day. So again, I mean that's a team. I mean, with their resources, it's a great school. They're always. I feel like they're always very good at everything, kind of, but football. Like they've been dominant at times at soccer, lacrosse, stuff like that.
Basketball recently.
Yeah. So, but again, I mean, it makes that conference better if they're in football. So it's good to see.
Well, hey, let's get into the rest of the poll. Obviously, like we just said, Virginia ranked number 24, obviously, probably for the first time since the early 2000s. And just a little thing I want to call out here, guys. Obviously, Notre Dame is an independent team in this, but there's not one non-power school in the top 25. I don't remember when the last time that's happened, especially with, what happens if none of the non-power, if none of the power schools are, what am I trying to say? None of these, I always forget what it's called. The
Group of 5.
Yeah. What if none of the group of 5 schools are in the top 25 at the end?
They still have rankings.
They rank them lower than
true,
25.
So.
Yeah.
So I don't even know who the highest ranked one is right now. I think it's Tulane, possibly. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check here. But none of them in the top 25. Cottrell, let's start with you. What's your opinion on this top 25? I think Oregon should have been number 1, but that's just me.
Of course
go ahead and take it away.
So I'm looking at it. There's a lot of things that kind of surprised me. Knowing that Oklahoma, and I guess you can only grade them of what you've seen so far from them, but knowing that they won't have Mateer for the next month, 3 weeks, whatever the case may be, having them up at 5 was, I guess, a little surprising to see there. And it's also surprising to see I don't want to call it necessarily disrespect, but the variance that they feel with some of the undefeated Power 4 schools. Like Georgia Tech doesn't have a loss. Vanderbilt doesn't have a loss. Iowa State doesn't have a loss. Then 14, 16, 17. Not saying that's not where they belong. Like I do think some of the schools ahead of them are better than them, but how do they view them as opposed to, Texas Tech is sitting there at 11 that have had a lot of really good wins this year. And they are also undefeated there. But then, I look at Indiana at 8, who's undefeated and has a good win over Illinois and things like that. But you have Penn State, who has one loss ahead of them, who Penn State, I think, is a really good team. They have a loss. They have not beaten a Power 4 school all year. So we talk about Notre Dame and them not having a win. Penn State's really in a similar boat. They have a really good loss, and they've beaten nobody so far this season. And then on the other side, you got Texas at 9, who they lost to the number 1 team in the country by 7. So you don't think you think that Indiana is better than Texas, but you don't think they're better than Penn State. Like I feel like Texas and Penn State have very similar losses with 1 and 2 with who they've beaten and things like that. So just a lot of small things where I'm like, there's no consistency here. I'd rather them just bunch up everybody who's really in the same boat.
I say there were consistency every single goddamn time we talk about this. And Cottrell already mentioned it a couple times. And this is, and I'll tell you why. Part of the reason is why this is. It's because they get beholden to what they rank these teams preseason before they started playing. Penn State was 1, 2, or 3 pretty much in every poll. So they have 1 loss. They can only knock them down so far because they lost to Oregon. Again, if you wait till week 7 or week 8 and start doing these rankings, even before the playoff stuff, to Cottrell's point, you could look at Penn State and be like, you know what? They probably should be ranked 7th. They haven't beat a Power 5 school yet, and they have a loss at home to Oregon. Biggest home field advantage that we always talk about. How do you drop them in front of an undefeated Indiana team who has a dominant win over a ranked Illinois team? Somebody explain it to me. Do I think Penn State's better than Indiana? Probably. But do we know that yet? Hell no, we don't. Do we really know what Texas is? No. I would tell you, based upon what I've seen, I think you make a good argument that Alabama should be in front of Texas. And then you go down the next row, like you guys said. Texas Tech's undefeated. They don't have a huge win, but they've looked very impressive. Iowa State has about as good as resume as anybody else can have so far for the tough teams they've beat. They're sitting down there, where they are. I don't know. It's what it always is. It's these people get attached to these teams because of where they're ranked before they even play a snap of football, and then they drop and raise people accordingly. And it sucks. It's, Ole Miss went up a ton of spots. Are they the 4th best team in college? I don't think so. But, again, LSU had that big win in the beginning of the year, so they were in the top 5, and now you feel like you have to flip-flop them. It's whatever. I'm glad. part of me is glad that like once we get to the college football rankings, all this junk gets thrown out because it's just nuts the way these teams go up and down on a loss, and depending on what kind of prestige your program has and everything else, it's annoying.
Yeah, I mean, it still gets me to see Vanderbilt ranked. It's still so hard to kind of wrap my head around Vanderbilt being a competitive program, especially in the SEC. That's a matchup, obviously, we're going to discuss later on this morning. Alabama, Vanderbilt, huge matchup during this week. Yeah, I mean, all jokes aside, I think Ohio State, Oregon are definitely the clear number one, number two teams in the country. I think you could swap them for 1 and 2, and I don't think anybody would be too terribly mad, except for Cottrell, of course. Miami,
but
I feel
honestly, after that, like, I mean, I guess it would be hard to argue Miami out of 3, but then honestly, after that, I think that's the only consensus things you would get.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that Oklahoma is being valued pretty high without John Mateer, though I do know that, obviously they had the bye last week, which obviously helped, which was a bye week helped his recovery. They got Kent State today. So that's going to be a kind of a win that, their backup should be able to handle. And then next week they kind of go into Texas. So I think that they're really just kind of like Oklahoma. They have a light schedule while he's out until they face Texas next week. But yeah, I think Oklahoma is being a little overvalued, especially. I'm very high on Oklahoma this year. I just think with their back, I don't even know who their backup quarterback is. There we go. Thank you, sir. So we'll see kind of how that goes for them. But everything else, I'm not too terribly upset with. I do see your guys' logic with the Penn State, Texas. Like Texas lost on the road to the number 1 team by a score, where Penn State lost at home. Like, how are they ranked ahead of Texas? And I think a lot of this is the eye test. Has Texas looked dominant in their other games? Has Texas looked like the Texas team we expected them to? And anytime you get the AP poll, you're going to have the opinions of obviously the voters and the writers and stuff. So I think that this is kind of going to be a shot in the barrel rankings. But I'm not too terribly upset with it. Virginia being in there is obviously awesome. Georgia Tech, I think they should be a little bit higher than they are. Florida State's right where they should be. Missouri, I think, is probably the most disrespected team in this poll. I feel like they should be in that top 12 with the way they've been playing. But no, I'm not too terribly upset. Obviously, like I said, none of this matter. I try to take it as a grain of salt, and none of this is going to take effect when be taken into effect when it comes to the college football playoff. And this is just for like guidelines, and I'm not too terribly upset with it.
I'm not necessarily upset with it, but it's just baffling because in reality it doesn't matter. CFP will ultimately, hopefully, get it right, and you get better variety, I guess, as far as teams go with it. But it's just the lack of consistency, I guess, for me, that just really gets me. Because, I mean, you talk about Missouri, like, what has Missouri done to not be in the top 12? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
You're undefeated. You've beaten everybody, and you've played well in really all your games there. You beat a South Carolina team who I get is unranked now, but part of the reason why they're unranked was because they won a game without their starting quarterback. Like, you beat them with their starting quarterback there. Like, that's not going to be a win that's valued as high at the end of the season because of a loss they took without their starting QB there. So I just wish that the AP poll had more people that actually watched football, because this really just feels like a brand recognition ranking there. Like, to Bill's point about the preseason rankings and making sure people don't drop too far, like, this feels exactly what that is there, because there's no reason why you would argue that Indiana's a worse team than Penn State, but they're a better team than Texas. Or, I'm looking at Missouri down there at 19, but you have a Florida State team that lost to number 24.
I was
hasn't
just
beaten anybody.
Florida State. Like, it's absurd. It's absurd.
Well, here's my question for you. I mean, Bill, you were saying you're not a huge fan of essentially teams that are ranked before we ever see them play football, and then they kind of juggle it from there. What would be your solution? Like, don't have any rankings till week 3, week 4,
That's
something like that?
That's a good point, Justin.
What do you say?
He said they rank those good preseason teams,
Correct.
So then they have better resumes at the end of the year.
So you get these, and we've talked about it before. You then at the end of the season, when you play some team week 1 or week 2 that never should have been ranked, but they're ranked based upon, writers and team prestige and all that stuff. And then at the end of the year, you go, oh, look, that team has 6 ranked wins versus this team who has 5. But you can go through and look at them, and that one ranked win team that they have at week 1 or week 2 is sitting there at the end of the year with 5 losses. They shouldn't get credit for that. That team never should have been ranked clearly. Like that's something they missed on at the beginning of the year. And teams get credit for it every year. This is we talk about this at the end of the year, like every year. Like you look at like Virginia creeping in, Arizona State. We have Vanderbilt and all them in. But if Alabama beats Vanderbilt today, where do you think Vanderbilt is next week?
Unranked.
Thank you. You want to know why? Because it's just going to be like ranked win, check on the old resume for Alabama. Florida State's a perfect example. How is Florida State behind Georgia and Alabama when they beat Alabama? And to their point now, their only loss is away in overtime to a ranked Virginia team. But it's like, and again, if you don't want to rank teams before the season, which I don't think you should, not picking on Penn State, but if you watch Penn State play those first 3 games, yeah, the scores are lopsided, but if you've watched the sloppiness within them and everything else, you would not vote Penn State number 2 preseason. You wouldn't have. I still think Penn State's a very good football team. I think they're going to factor into the end. But again, you're just allowing these teams to get cheap ranked wins. So come college football playoff time, you sit there and you're like, yeah, Alabama's got 6 ranked wins. But then you look at it and you're like, well, 3 of them aren't ranked anymore, and 2 of them have 4 or 5 losses. So it's like, how are you really giving them a quality win for that? Just because of when they happen to play them? That's why they should get. I don't think any rankings should come out till after week 4, because then at that point you've either seen most teams play at least one conference game. You go through all your non-conference. So in the case of an Ohio State, Texas, who actually scheduled somebody tough this year, you get to see them play each other, but then go play 3 other games and like, all right, what do we really think they are now? Because I promise you, these rankings would look completely different if you did it that way. And I honestly think it would be a more honest glance at how good some of these teams are. Like they're all crammed in here now for like ulterior motives, a lot of them. And like I said, like BYU, Utah, Virginia, any of them, they're gone. They won't hang around long. But again, you have a Georgia team that loses at home and they fall like 4 spots. But Florida State loses on the road in overtime after beating the 10th ranked team who just beat Georgia on the road. They fall 15 spots. Why? Make it make sense.
And they never will. They never will. But hey, I totally agree with you, Bill. I think they got to wait to release the polls. I think that essentially the strength of your schedule should be determined by the final rankings at the end of the year, not where they are at the moment. Because like you said, Florida State has a ranked loss to Virginia, but technically on the schedule, they lost to an unranked Virginia last week. Because like I said they weren't ranked going into that game. So it's gonna be interesting how they kind of sort it out. Obviously, we're waiting for the CFP poll, the one that actually matters. But this will just kind of be nice little guidelines for us along the way to kind of see and help us guess. And hopefully this year you got to do the college football player reveal show again, see if we can get that squeezed in. But anything else about the polls we want to talk about before we jump into a little bit of transfer portal news and then begin recaps?
No, I'm good.
No.
All right. We're going to jump forward.
Alex
hey, man. Oops.
Loving his ducks. He sneaks in.
First off, this is big news, man. This is huge news. It's not just for Mekhi Hughes, but I think for NIL. I think this is like a cautionary tale. Oregon running back Mekhi Hughes will redshirt. He self-redshirted himself this year. Asked Dan Lanning if he could be redshirted. He played in the first a few games of the season, but did not travel to Penn State. He transferred from Tulane, a place where he had immense success, over 2,000 rushing yards in 2 seasons there. I think it was like over 2,300 rushing yards, actually, while he was there for 2 years. Transferred to Oregon in the transfer portal in the offseason for a reported $700,000. Oregon has amazing depth at running back right now, so he kind of got buried on the depth chart, has not seen the field a lot this season, had most fans debating to see if he was injured at the start of the season because we didn't see him. But really, we just have a bunch of workhorse backs on that depth chart that kind of pushed him to that 4th spot on the depth chart. So he's asking for redshirting. It looks like he's probably going to enter the transfer portal after the year. Dan then, of course, honored his request to be a redshirt. Would prefer not to lose him, but I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. What do you guys think about this issue?
This is one of those, like, again, this is, I think cautionary tale is a good way to look at it. And I think you see it more and more with the big schools that have resources. Like, they threw $700,000 at this kid, he transferred. They go, all right, you know what? 2 younger kids we have are better than we thought. Now we're just not going to play him. And now he wastes the year. I don't know. I don't know how you curtail it per se. But I mean, it's something I would hope that doesn't become the norm. Because again, this kid could have went somewhere else and played and helped another team and made another team better. So I don't know. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where, hey, if you do pay somebody to come transfer in, they got to play. But at the same time, I don't think we need to get into the realm of teams just paying people to get them and have no intention of playing them and get back to the old gray shirt scandal that Alabama was running for a long time. So I don't think we need that coming back either, where they were just promising kids walk-on roles to get scholarships the following year so they wouldn't go commit to Georgia or somebody else. So I don't think we need to get back into that stuff either. So, made a decision, didn't work out. He'll probably have to go play college next year versus if he had a good year at Oregon this year, obviously he would have just went to the draft. So hope everything works out for the kid. But yeah, I mean, grass isn't always green on the other side where all the money is. I guess that's the cautionary tale here.
100% agreed. I mean, $700,000 is a lot, and I'm not going to lie to you. If Oregon gave me that much money, I would imagine that they would think that I'd be their starting running back, or at least in the rotation of running backs there. Seems like a lot of money to give a kid that's not going to play for you. So part of it could be on him. He could have came in and as good as he looked while he was at Tulane, maybe the speed of the game just wasn't the same, running with this Oregon team. And they got to see him in practice, and they got to see him in comparison to, 4-star, 5-star kids all over the field. So, part of that could be on him. I do think, though, this is ultimately going to be I think, a good thing for college football in general here. I think you get a lot of kids who are going to have these big time years at some of these smaller schools, and they're going to be like, oh, well, Oregon wants me to go play running back for them. And yes, you can use this as a perfect example of just because a bigger team and, more money and better spotlight, things like that doesn't necessarily always mean a better decision. Mekhi Hughes had been pretty much looked at in the same light as what Tyjae Spears was while he was at Tulane, because he was the running back that ultimately replaced him. And we know Tyjae is, obviously in the NFL now and all this. So, I mean, the pipeline was there. Like, you can get to the league from Tulane, especially if you have the success in the same system. So I do think ultimately this will be a good thing for college football. And hopefully these kids are starting to realize that more money doesn't necessarily always mean more opportunity and things like that. So it's probably hard to turn down the money in the moment, especially if, you don't necessarily come from money. But at the same time, I do think it's going to be important for these kids, especially of Mekhi Hughes' talent, to make better long-term decisions there. Because if he would have stayed another year at Tulane, in my mind, there's no doubt that he would have got drafted this upcoming year.
I just want to get into Dan Lanning's head or see these practices as what separated the other guys from him, because he seemed like a workhorse back at Tulane. Was the other guy just outworked him? Did he come in with an attitude and cocky, thinking he was gonna, hey, I'm a $700,000 man, they're gonna start me out the gate, and his work ethic wasn't there? I'm just curious what it is, or are other guys just better? I mean, I love what I'm seeing from the Oregon Duck running back room. Obviously, Hill Jr. coming out of nowhere. He had 82 yards this last week. Obviously, you got Noah Whittingham returning. Jaden Lamar is surprising people. I expected. I thought that he would be at least number 2 on the depth chart this year. So I'm curious if it's a talent thing or if it's an effort thing that kept him off, the top of the Ducks depth chart, because we saw what he could do last year and the explosiveness he has in his playmaking ability. So I wish I could just know what the difference was between him and the starting backs at the University of Oregon, where he didn't even travel to Penn State. I mean, he's an asset that I feel like I would have wanted on the sideline at Penn State to use at who knows what time. So we shall see. Obviously, there's been a couple cautionary tales this year. Obviously, him being at the running back position, and then Nico Lamalaeva at UCLA. His transferring as a quarterback, going 0-4 there. So a lot of we're kind of seeing the darker side of the transfer portal and how, just like you said, the grass isn't always greener. Had Nico stayed in Tennessee, he'd be looked at a lot better light for the success that Tennessee's having. Had Mekhi stayed at Tulane, he'd be playing right now. He'd be on his way to another 1,000-yard season. Instead, he's resting his body, for next year. What's the soonest he can enter the transfer portal? That's going to be. They haven't settled on the date for the January, but is that going to be the first time he can enter the portal? He can't enter before that.
No, he can't go anywhere else before that. I mean, he could honestly declare that, those are his intentions there, which I'm sure people will be talking to him under the table anyway, just to try and get first dibs on him. But yeah, he won't be able to officially be in which isn't going to happen unless Dan Lanning got fired some way. That's the only thing that would essentially open up the portal right away for kids. So yeah, he's going to have to wait there. I do think one other thing that's kind of interesting, I don't know how much NIL played a factor in, we talked about Dickey a few weeks ago, the receiver from Oregon that ultimately got kicked off the team there. I'm curious to know how much NIL plays a factor in, how they bring kids in, but I think it's a positive and a negative at the same time for Dan Lanning, the way that he is running that team there. I say it's a positive because it's no matter how much money we give you, you have to earn your spot. I don't care if we gave you $700K. I don't care if you were a 5-star. I don't care about none of that. I care about production on the field and who's going to give us the best opportunity to win. But at the same time, I also think that it's a detriment because, yes, money is going to be very enticing to some kids. But at the same time, I would look at it all right, well, you had this guy who was clearly a talented guy at running back in Mekhi. You had this 5-star receiver come in, and I'm sure they both got the money clearly, but they didn't play here. So what is that outcome going to look like for me? Some kids don't want to, some kids aren't going to want to work for it. And I will say you probably don't want those kids in your program anyway. But I do think this can potentially have a negative effect on recruiting, just kind of seeing how these two situations played out.
I see what you're saying there, because it's even if you are a top talent, you're not which I actually like the mindset of, hey, even if you're a top talent, you're not guaranteed playing time. It's everything's
for sure
earned here. I love
it's the mindset you have to have. Absolutely.
But my concern, Cottrell, is the boosters and the investors that are giving the money for NIL. They're going to be you just spent $700K on a dude who didn't even play.
That's another good
point. Are they going to give him the flexibility? Or really, I mean, I'm not really an expert on how those negotiations are being done, over the phone or, in back rooms or whatever is going down there. But I feel like the leash of my checkbook will be shortened a little bit. I feel yes, I'm going to invest my $700K in an amazing player, but if he's not going to play, maybe next year I only give a $250,000 available because I don't want to, waste my money on some guy that's not going to help.
The one thing with that though is that you get a pass with that when you win, and Dan Lanning has done a great job with winning. Let Oregon go out and win a playoff game or a couple playoff games, that money will still be flowing in. And although it may have been on a kid that didn't play, I think those boosters will look at it as money well spent. So you keep winning. I don't think you have to run into that problem, but you start losing some big games, then I think Dan Lanning is going to have some of those donors looking at him a little sideways.
Bill, any comments about the transfer portal or Mekhi Hughes before we move on to recaps?
No, nothing I can say before you guys haven't touched on. I mean, it's again, we don't know how he showed up, and did he show up with an attitude? I mean, you would know better than that. I mean, if there was any reports of that, but
Right.
Maybe they just like the other two kids better. But at the same time,
Three.
like I said,
kids running 3 kids over him.
Yeah. I mean, it's him not dressing and going to Penn State, I think, was very alarming. So it's a cautionary tale, and you hope people just aren't buying people up just to buy them.
I mean, now that you mentioned that, that's kind of brilliant. No one else can have him. We heard USC was top on him. We're going to offer him more money and just sit him on the bench. I love it. That's ultimate chess move right there. All right, but that's what we have right now. Obviously, as the season goes on, transfer portal will open. Our show will still be going on during that time period, so our eyes will be very glued to this situation and see if he kind of sticks around to Oregon or if he, what I expect, enters the transfer portal and gets out of town. But let's jump into some recaps, y'all. Week 5, games of the week, recaps. We had a lot of great games last week. All 4 of these, obviously, one-score games. Bill, you're the maestro. Where are we starting at?
We'll go down to Ole Miss and we'll start there. Ole Miss 24, LSU 19. I got this game wrong last week. I thought LSU would go in there and be able to move the ball, and LSU's offense has gone backwards since the beginning of the year. It has not progressed. Myself being one of them, and Cottrell was very high on Garrett Nussmeier. He's not playing bad, but he's not playing to the level that we thought he was going to. Got to hand it to Lane Kiffin again. I made a joke last week, but one of the two of these coaches was going to have to win this big game. It wasn't going to end in a tie, but I really thought LSU would kind of turn the corner per se. I think Ole Miss was a little bit of an unknown based upon their schedule at the beginning of the year, but they went out at home in Oxford and they played really well. Lane Kiffin went for it on a big 4th down, had a huge conversion. And again, Ole Miss is, I guess, a team that's going to factor in here down the road. Their schedule, like everybody else in the SEC, is pretty tough. Bad loss for LSU. I still think they're the better football team, but didn't play that way. And like I said, when we talked about the rankings, Ole Miss is up to number 4 now. I think that's crazy, but we'll see if they're deserving of that ranking or not the next month or so. But again, really, I thought LSU's defense and then obviously the way their offense had been playing, I thought it would be enough to go down there and win. And LSU just didn't look good. Looked a little flat, not really explosive on offense. And again, I got to give Lane Kiffin credit. I thought Lane Kiffin called a really good game. So hats off to Ole Miss. Big win for them. Kind of a perplexing loss for Brian Kelly, but he's got a bunch of them, so can't be that surprised.
Yeah, definitely a good win for Ole Miss here. And I think one of your points about LSU is one that really does surprise me, and it's the fact that as much improvement as we've seen on them defensively, the offense has not been explosive at all season. And it's not like they don't have the playmakers to do it. Like, you have Henson, you have Anderson, you have Nussmeier back. Like, you have a lot of talent on that offense, but they cannot seem to find the explosiveness that you typically see in an LSU offense. I think on the flip side of that, though, Ole Miss is dangerous. Do I think they're the number 4 ranked team in the country? No. But I do think the way that their defense played, like, they were a lot of bend but don't break, and they made LSU work for all 19 of those points. But then offensively, especially at the quarterback position, I know I brought it up last week in Trinidad Chambliss, and I knew what he should look like in a game like this just because I know the kind of athlete that he is. But I think this is one of those games where you go out and you get a ton of confidence playing an LSU team like that. The fact that they went for it on 4th and 3 at the end of the game and Lane put the ball in Trinidad's hands to not just make the play to get 3 yards, but he went above and beyond, it was a big time game and they ultimately got to close that out. Like, I think when you have a head coach that has the confidence like that in a younger quarterback, I know he's a transfer from Ferris State there, but you have that confidence in a guy who's starting his second or third career game in your program, and you go out and beat a good LSU team, in my opinion. I think that's a lot there. So Ole Miss is definitely not one of those teams who I had at the beginning of the year or preseason. And again, I don't think they're the number 4 best team in the country here, but I definitely think that this was a game that kind of put me on notice with Ole Miss, and I think they may have some success here moving forward to potentially win some big games later down the line.
All I gotta say is welcome to the college football playoff, Ole Miss. Like I said, this is a huge win, obviously at home. Trinidad Chambliss looked fantastic, and I'm looking at the rest of our schedule. Obviously, they have a bye this week. But their schedule looks very favorable. I see maybe one loss on the schedule. Obviously, they got Washington State coming up next week. And then they got Georgia, Oklahoma on back-to-back weeks. And then from there, the schedule really kind of evens out as far as Citadel, Florida, Mississippi State. I think Ole Miss may have, with this win, I think that as long as they don't the wheels completely don't fall off, which obviously is very possible. It is possible. Yeah. As much as I love Lane Kiffin, I love Ole Miss. Obviously, I chose LSU to win this game. Reverse psychology. I knew Ole Miss would win, but I couldn't pick them because then they would have lost. So, you're welcome, Lane Kiffin. All jokes aside, I didn't really know what to expect from this Ole Miss team, especially going into this game. Quarterback controversy, who's going to start? I feel like on this show, we felt like Trinidad was the right choice. Austin Simmons has a little bit of a turnover problem. He's got 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions this year. I expect to see him in the transfer portal next year as well with Mekhi Hughes. They can go make another team really great. But no, Ole Miss's defense, man, they really stepped up. I love what I've seen from that defense, flying around, group tackling. Everyone's getting to the ball. And 8 for 16 on third downs against LSU ain't no joke. And holding LSU to 2 for 11, getting them off the field, forcing them into third long situations, eliminating LSU's rushing attack. Garrett Nussmeier did not look as good as we've seen him play previously. I think it's because Ole Miss was getting penetration, forcing him out of the pocket. I think they looked fantastic. Ole Miss, though, you got to clean up the penalties. 14 penalties, 109 yards. Against the, in another game like this, that's going to be the dagger that ultimately leads you to an L. So you got to clean that up a little bit, and you'll be more disciplined, while you're on the field. But other than that, great win. Bill, where are we going next?
I think we'll save the best 2 for last. So we'll go over to Champaign, Illinois. Illinois rebounds a big win over USC. Talked about USC a couple times indirectly because it's part of our Notre Dame argument that we like to have on the show. But Illinois rebounded from a shellacking from Indiana the week before. Played a lot better. Offense looked a little bit more on par with what we're used to seeing. The defense obviously played better. They did not give up 63 points this time. And USC they just can't get over the hump. Finally got ranked, going on a road trip where I think a lot of people thought it was a winnable game, especially after the way Illinois played against Indiana. And then again, they just have defensive problems. They looked a lot better at the beginning of the year. Like that unit had kind of been shored up a little bit, and then Illinois just goes out and scores 34. So interesting matchup. I don't know. I don't really know if the Illinois-Indiana game was just some kind of, just freak thing, or if this is really what Illinois is, or USC's just not that good. I guess we'll find out in the next couple weeks. But big bounce back win for Illinois to keep their hopes alive. USC kind of a tough loss going into the toughest part of their schedule in the next couple weeks. So a little bit surprised by the outcome here.
Yeah, one thing I will tell you is USC's offense looks great. Illinois' offense looked great this week. Both teams were combined 14 for 24 on third downs. Defenses could not get them off the field. But USC's defense, which has been their Achilles heel over the last couple of years, we've talked about how, hey, their offense is going to score 40, but their defense is going to allow 45. We've always kind of made those kind of comments over the last couple of years, especially when Caleb Williams was the quarterback. That's one of the reasons they had 4 losses a couple of years ago, was that defense was absolutely atrocious. And in this game, I feel like USC regressed a little bit. Earlier in the year, their defense looked like they'd been improving, making some stops. This week, Illinois was able to average 12.3 yards per pass attempt, 4.9 yards per rush. I mean, your team is essentially getting half of the yards they need on a first down every single play. You're obviously not going to get off the field. And like I said, they kept shooting themselves in the foot with penalties. 8 penalties, 69 yards. And then the one compliment I will say about USC, though, is Jaden Maeva is a baller. I'm excited to see him kind of progress through his collegiate career, and I think that USC will be a team to be reckoned with before his time is done. At USC, I like his leadership ability. I like what he can do with his arm talent. 364 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So I think the future is bright for USC. And Bill, to answer your question as far as that Illinois game, obviously losing, getting boat raced by Indiana 63-10. I want to think that that's just an anomaly and that's just like a one-off situation, but I think the jury's still out on Illinois, and obviously the jury's still out on USC on what kind of teams these guys are going to be. I think USC will be obviously tested next week when they play Michigan, and then you got the Notre Dame game right after that. So I think by the time that USC plays Nebraska 4 weeks from now, we're going to have a clear picture if this USC team is someone to be reckoned with in the Big Ten this year, or even in the college football playoff discussion. And then Illinois, like I said, we're going to have to kind of figure out and slow play them. They got a couple big matchups, one next week against Ohio State. How will Illinois kind of prepare for Ohio State's offense, and how will their offense prepare to face Ohio State's defense? So 2 teams that could both have extremely great potentials for their seasons, but a lot of question marks, more questions than answers right now. So I can't wait for next week for a lot of those questions to be answered.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this game it went a lot how I was expecting it to. I thought Illinois will bounce back pretty well in this one. I think the one thing, though, with USC, like you talk about them having a bright future, Alex, I mean, at what point, though, do we put Lincoln to the fire? This is just another game where, and I'm not saying this is a Lincoln Riley blunder or anything like that, but it's a game against an Illinois team who, like you said, got boat raced last week. I think this is one of those ones where, you look at it like, oh, USC's defense has been improved. Maeva has been playing well at the quarterback position. They have a run game. Mekhi Lemon has looked incredible at the wide receiver position, and they still can't find a way to get it done against the Illinois team who, after looking at the game last week, I thought USC would have the opportunity to have Illinois be completely unranked. Like, they could have been a forgotten about team losing to Indiana, USC, and then Ohio State. Like, that could have been it. Nail could have been in the coffin and could have wrote them off at that point. But I did pick Illinois ultimately to win this game here. I thought the bounce back would happen. Altmaier played a lot better, didn't turn the ball over, was 20 of 26 in this one. And, Illinois was able to capitalize off of those turnovers. They got a fumble early, and then, they got that interception later on in the game there as well. It'll be interesting. I'm more intrigued about USC moving forward here because for Illinois, this upcoming Ohio State game will be their last big game on their schedule, in my opinion. But USC is one of those ones where if they lose another big-time game, or maybe they shock a team and win a game, they're just that big-time question mark because we know what they can do offensively, but the defense isn't consistently there.
I'd be very curious to see how Illinois kind of gets ranked going forward. Because to your point, if they lose to Ohio State and then win out, I'm just really curious to see where they fall when it's all said and done. Because you'd have a horrible loss to Illinois. Obviously, we don't know what the score of the Ohio State game will be, but I think they would be a headache at 10-2 for the committee. And USC, like Alex mentioned, they have Michigan next week. Then they have Notre Dame a couple weeks after that. and they're going to kind of be out of chances as well to kind of prove themselves. So next month is going to be very telling for both those teams. But next, let's go up to the land of undisciplined players. And we'll go to Athens, Georgia, where I feel like the three of us live in a twilight zone. Because just nobody ever asked Kirby Smart hard questions at Georgia. I would just love to be a part of the press for 1 week and go to Georgia. But that's not going to happen. So Georgia 21, Alabama 24. Alabama goes into Georgia again and beats Kirby Smart, which is crazy. You look at the success the Bulldog program's had the last decade, 2 national championships, a couple of appearances. Alabama routinely goes into Athens and beats Georgia. And this isn't even a Nick Saban thing. So, I mean, Kellen DeBoer's first, I think, signature notch on the belt win for him in Alabama. A lot of people wrote them off after their early loss to Florida State. A couple other shaky wins. Huge statement W. I will tell you, if you watch the game, I still feel like Georgia is definitely the better football team. But the word we've used before, and it literally came into play, the most important play of the game in this game. Georgia players aren't disciplined. Alabama went for it on 4th and 1 to kind of seal the game. Georgia stuffs them. Kid comes flying out of nowhere 5 seconds after the play is really kind of over. Jumps on top of the pile, gets an unnecessary roughness penalty. Alabama wins the game. Georgia would have had the ball around midfield, field goal to tie, touchdown to win. They moved the ball all day long, shot themselves in the foot numerous times with penalties, that stalled drives, turnover here or there. But again, if you watched it, you would come away, and I think you would definitely say Georgia's the better football team. But when you do stupid things, you let football games slip away. Alabama was tough. They grinded. They stayed in there. Ty Simpson, again, another game where I don't think the kids get enough credit for being as tough as he is and for playing as well as he is. I still think that the narrative too much around Alabama is just they're just not winning big football games. But another gritty game from him. Like I said, huge win for Alabama. So going forward, this is this game can matter come the end of the year, depending on how these teams play down the stretch. So really, really, really big win for Kellen DeBoer in Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama came into this game. Go ahead, Kittrell.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just saying, Alabama came into this game with a game plan, and they really stuck to it because their game plan was to control the clock, control time of possession, and try to control the line of scrimmage. And you got to give it to Alabama because even when they weren't offensively effective running the ball, they still kept with that game plan. They only averaged 3.1 yards per carry, but that was definitely enough. They ran the ball 38 times. They threw the ball 39, very balanced, but they ran the ball a lot late in the game to kind of run out the clock. Ty Simpson, I do have to apologize to him. Obviously, I've been giving him a lot of disrespect this year on his quarterback ability, and he definitely kind of showed me what he's capable of this year. I like the way he's progressing in this system. I think that Kalen DeBoer found his guy here Alabama. I think he makes great decisions, no interceptions. And then on the other side, Gunnar Stockton, I feel like Georgia was trying not to let Gunnar lose them the game. Obviously, they were trailing most of the game. They ran the ball 33 times. They only let Gunnar drop back 20 for actual pass attempts. I think they got to open up the offense a little bit. In a game like this, they almost looked like Georgia was kind of playing not to lose and instead of to go out and win the game. So I feel like they got to switch something up. They got to play with a little more intensity, especially at home, rivalry game in this situation. Yeah, I mean, Alabama impressed. Georgia did not. And going forward, though, Alabama's got a tough schedule ahead. Obviously, they have Missouri next week, Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, all still on the schedule over the next 5 weeks. So this Alabama team is definitely going to be tested. We're going to kind of see what kind of they're made of and if they truly are contenders or not. This game would say that they are. I think that Missouri game is going to be a huge tape measure game for Alabama. And then Georgia, they really got to bounce back. They have a bye today. Next week, they got Auburn. I think that's a great bounce back opportunity. Then they got Ole Miss and Florida. So, again, SEC schedule never really relaxes for you. So both these teams still in the college football playoff hunt, obviously. Georgia can't let this loss spiral them, and Alabama's got to keep the momentum going forward.
I was just going to say that this is the most must-win September game of probably all time for that Alabama team. I mean, you lose this one, especially knowing what your schedule is like coming up here. You've dug yourself a monster grave to try and dig out of. For Georgia, it's one of those games where, you never want to look at you don't want to be optimistic about losses or be happy about losses. But if I'm Georgia, I'm going into this game, like coming out of this game thinking we were 100% the better football team. We deserved to win. We didn't. But this was more on us than it was on Bama. Like, I think in other games, you look at it like, damn, they were a better football team than us. Like, we did everything right and we still lost. There's no silver lining there. I think for Georgia, you don't have much optimism about them being disciplined in the future, just based on what we know Kirby Smart let slide there. But with that said, I think those are things that are 100% fixable. So if I'm looking at it from Georgia's perspective, it's like, all right, that loss probably shouldn't have happened the way that it did. It happened. Let's move on from it. For Alabama, that was 100% a must-win game at all costs. And Alex, I think you made a great point about what their game plan was coming in. Let's make it so we don't want this to be a track meet. We don't want to have to score 38 points to win this football game. Let's try and limit the possessions. Let's be smart with clock. Like, I think that's a great game plan. They did a good job as well of getting their best player involved in the game in Ryan Williams. So I think this was just a weird matchup. I ultimately think, though, this is going to make the SEC very fun. We talked about it on Wire to Wire on Wednesday with Bama giving Georgia a loss. So you have Bama has a loss, Georgia has a loss, LSU has a loss, Texas has a loss. Like, there's so many good teams that have losses. Of course, we get the Bama and Vanderbilt matchup. Like, Vandy could potentially have a loss after today. There's so many SEC schools that already have early losses. They're not even necessarily in conference play, but just in general, these early losses. You're going to have 2-loss, 3-loss SEC teams at the end of the year, just based on numbers and the matchup that they still have. Like, I know upcoming, you got Oklahoma and Texas very soon. That's another game where Texas could either have 2 losses or Oklahoma get their first loss. So you have these schools that still play each other a ton that are going to pick up these losses. And just thinking about that while also thinking about a team that's on this graphic right now in Illinois, who is at worst, in my opinion, going to be a 10-2 team. That conversation is going to open up the door like, hey, 10-2 Illinois, whose best one is USC, or do we go with 9-3 SEC school who lost to every big time school they played? So it'll be very interesting here moving forward there. But this was an absolute must win for Bama. Got to give them credit for finding a way to win this game, although I think it was on the backs of Georgia, more so losing the game.
The logjam that could occur at 10-2, 9-3 between the Big Ten and the SEC is crazy. Like we talked about Illinois, Michigan could factor in there somewhere. You're going to have the upper end of Oregon, Ohio State. Penn. Penn State could end up with 2 losses. I mean, it's very feasible. So, the decisions I think this year that are going to have to be made could be crazy. And don't get me wrong, there could be upsets down the road that change all this and change that narrative. But the way it's starting to look, I don't think you have a clear-cut best team in the SEC. And I think you have 2 in the Big Ten. But, wait, do you guys play each other this year?
Nope.
That don't play each other till the end. So you're talking about possibly those 2 teams walking into conference championship week undefeated. So they would automatically be in. And then you get down to the Illinois, the Indianas, the Michigans. On the SEC, you have A&M who's still undefeated. Talking about Ole Miss. Texas has a loss, but it's not in conference. So, I mean, in a weird way, they're kind of sitting above a bunch of these teams too. Their losses on the road to the number 1 team in the country. You know, and again, I don't think it's feasible to think 2 or 3 of these teams in the SEC are just going to run the table and beat everybody. I think they're going to beat up on everybody. And you got the Miami Florida State debate. So I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun. You know, Justin Louder, to your point, Georgia cost me $791, and I still don't want to talk about it. It's too soon. So, but I feel your pain on that one. But last but not least, let's get to the big one. Let's get to the one Alex is going to start doing jumping jacks over. Number 6, Oregon goes into Happy Valley, whiteout. I will say this, and this is not a slight to Oregon whatsoever.
Oh boy, here we go.
No. It's more of a slight to Penn State. And actually, I actually think part of the credit is how well Oregon started the game. It is one of the more subdued whiteouts that I can remember.
Oh, jeez.
I'm not taking anything away from you. I'm saying I'm not. Part of it is I think the way you guys went in and started the game. My point being, I feel like
it wasn't a rowdy whiteout.
It wasn't. To my recollection, it didn't. I didn't feel it through the TV as much as I usually do. And again, I think some of that's is Oregon's credit coming out and kind of weathering the storm very early. I just feel like after the beginning, like midway through the first quarter to the end of the third quarter, that place was really quiet for its own standards. And again, when you're watching the play on the field, and I think reality set into a lot of people that Oregon was probably going to win the game. That's what happened. And then obviously they came alive in the fourth when all hell broke loose. But a little disappointed at Penn State. But that being said, listen, you know, we joke with Alex a lot on the show and about, you know, going to road environments and this and that. You got to tip your cap to Oregon on this one. They went in there. They played a hell of a football game. They did, in my opinion, control the game for almost a full 3 quarters. Penn State finally got their offense going a little bit, broke a couple runs, made a couple big plays. I think the fumble was the turning point in the game, and that went Oregon's way. Blade of grass is a hell of a description to overturn a fumble. But
hey, man, you're down.
Neither here nor there. You know, that was a huge momentum, a huge emotional turning point in the game. Went Oregon's way. But again, you got to take advantage of it. And some teams don't. The good teams do. They did. Went to overtime, took care of business. Just an absolute huge win on the road for Oregon. And to Cottrell's point, beginning of the show, Penn State hasn't lost to Oregon, and they have 3 wins over FBS schools, pretty much. Do I still think they're really good? I do. I think I texted both you guys. You know, it was right around halftime, and said the only thing I'm convinced of so far was that both these defenses can win a national championship. Definitely still think that's true. I really like the variety of Oregon's offense, though. I think when they really started to get Dante Moore involved and getting him out of the pocket, let him make plays a little bit more naturally versus unscripted, I think that's really when Oregon's offense really came to life. Penn State's got to trade the trading wheels off Drew Aller. I don't know what we're waiting for. We talked about this on Wednesday. The kid could throw the ball. Let him throw the ball. They brought in a guy at OC that everybody got really excited about at Penn State, but I think they forgot to realize the offense that he ran in Kansas, they were not going to be able to run in Penn State. Penn State is set to run more of a pro-style offense, but that being said, you bring in 5 receivers from the transfer portal, and we're still throwing bubble screens and slants. When they started throwing the ball downfield and actually putting pressure on Oregon's defense, that's when they started to move the ball. So you got to do. Like there's no redos next year. You went through that last year. Drew Aller threw that interception. Notre Dame ended their season. This was supposed to be the redemption year. I don't know what we're waiting for. Get rid of the vanilla ice cream. Like I need some swirl. I need some something. I need something else from Penn State. I need some Jimmy's. I need Jimmy's. I need some swirl. I need something. Let the kid throw the ball. It's the only way you're going to win. This grind it out stuff. It's not what they're designed to do. So Penn State's got to open the playbook up. I still think they're a very good football team. But again, to what you guys mentioned earlier in the year, I from what I've seen so far, I think Ohio State and Oregon are clearly the best two teams in the country as we sit here right now in week 6.
Alex, this is your team.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I mean, it is my team. And I want respect. Last year, Oregon comes from the Pac-12. Oh, we're going to show you what real football is. We win the Big Ten championship. Then last week, oh, you're going to finally realize what it's like to be in a real college environment with this whiteout. You're going to learn. What did we learn? That we can handle it, that we can win, that Dante Moore is the best quarterback in the country, because that's what I learned. And that's exactly what he is. I watched this man complete calmness, complete coolness, control that offense, make cross the field throws on a dime without even breaking a sweat. This is the best. And I said it in the group chat also, is that this may be the best defense I have ever seen at the University of Oregon. It's my time as a fan. And this offense might be one of the best offenses they've ever had that I've seen since Joey Harrington in the early 2000s. This offense is even better than when Marcus Mariota was leading the way. And they said they got 4 running backs that can carry the rock. They got wide receivers out the wazoo. They got Kenyon Sadiq absolutely killing it at tight end, fantastic blocking, great hands. DeCorian Moore, they did not shy away from throwing the ball against Penn State secondary, and I absolutely love that. And then, like I said, Drew Aller made a fantastic throw. Was that late third quarter, early fourth quarter, right after the Ducks went up 2 scores? He made a great throw to the corner of the end zone. So, like I said, Drew Aller is a top talent. Just like you said, I think Penn State, and hopefully they will. Exactly, Justin. Joey. I feel like they need to take the training wheels off of Drew Aller so that we can truly see what he's capable of. Like I said, but really, what made me the most happy as a Duck fan going into this game is that we were able to eliminate the rushing attack of Penn State. I even mentioned to you guys last week that my biggest concern going into this game was how the Ducks defense would stop the run, because they had struggled earlier in the year. I even said I liked what they did against Oregon State, but again, Oregon State's rushing attack versus Penn State's not really comparable. But they really controlled they controlled the line of scrimmage. I mean, Katron Allen had his long run of 19 yards. He was 12 for 54, 4.5 yards and a touchdown. But Nick Singleton was absolutely eliminated as far as his effectability during that game. He only had 11 carries, 21 yards. His long was a 6-yard run. I believe it was in the first half. I'm just, like I said, yeah, I know this is my time to talk about my team, but I'm still in shock. I'm still in awe. It feels like this is too good to be true, how good this Oregon team looks. And I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch. I don't want to look too far in the future. But when I look at the schedule that we have left, when I look at, what this team is capable of, sky's the limit here. And I almost, like I said, when they interviewed Dan Lanning at the end of the game, you could see the emotion on his face, how much this game meant to him and the program. He was almost in tears while they were interviewing him. And him and Dante Moore had a nice moment where Dante Moore was crying. I mean, this game was huge for these Oregon Duck players. They came in with everyone against them, and they showed the country who they are and what they're made of. And that's why a lot of the talking heads are saying this is the best team in the country. And I back that up. Cottrell, go ahead. Say something mean or something rude about Oregon or something.
No, I mean, there's really nothing rude to say. I think that, and I know a lot of it is jokes, or you may even mean some of it. But when we talk about certain games having like the muster behind it, like this being a whiteout, like you can say that you guys dominated the entire game. I mean, that just wouldn't be accurate there. But
we did.
Penn State, like this being a whiteout game, like this is a big time win for Oregon. No doubt about that. But I think when me and Bill talk about these games, we're saying they don't come easy. Like for example, like last year, we talked about the Wisconsin game. Didn't necessarily say you'd lose, but said it wouldn't come easy. And this is a game where going up to Happy Valley doesn't come easy. And I think that as a whole, Did Oregon look like a better team for 3 quarters? Absolutely. Was there a lot to hang your hat on? Absolutely. Brazilian Munch, you go down, they score first in OT. The fact that you go down and you get a touchdown right away, and then you come back in double OT and put the touchdown up on the board to put the pressure on Penn State, like that is huge. And then ultimately getting the interception at the end to seal it, that's huge. I'd have all the confidence in the world if I was an Oregon fan right now. This is definitely the hardest game on your schedule. And the fact that you went on the road and took advantage of it and came out with a win says a lot. Like I'd be absolutely pumped about this game. On the flip side of it, if you're Penn State, you look at it as another big game, another James Franklin loss. And I don't even necessarily put this game on him. Like I don't think it was poor coaching or anything like that. Bill, you say the fumble kind of turned the tide in this game. I do think there was a big time shift in momentum at that moment, because getting it from being Penn State ball to Oregon literally scoring a touchdown on the very next play, yes, that definitely changes momentum there. But I think Penn State had ample opportunity to still go off and win this game here, especially in overtime. Like you got the score, you just need to stop at that point. The fumble doesn't matter. You need to stop, and you're walking out victorious. And that ultimately didn't happen there. And Oregon had even left the door open for them. They scored a touchdown first. They didn't get the 2-point conversion. If anything, you just go down, you score, and whatever happens there. Like you're not in a position where you should have necessarily lost the game there. It's tough for me to truly evaluate that Penn State offense because on one hand, I do think, once they took off the training wheels for Drew Aller, he looked a lot more effective. But on the other hand, it's like in double OT, I put the ball in my best player's hands, like my QB's hands, and then he goes and gets that turnover. Like that's something that can't happen for a guy that is coming back for his senior year. Like that, he has to be better in that position. You have to know that that's not there, or how the defense is getting played, or even that if it's a tricky throw, it's one thing if that's 4th down, but for that to be 1st down, first play in the drive, like that's just something that absolutely can't happen. Penn State's got to figure it out, and they'll have plenty of opportunity to figure it out. This will be a tough loss, but if I'm Oregon, if I'm Alex, like I 100% understand having all the confidence in the world there.
Next up, Indiana, though. That's gonna be another test for the offense. I think Indiana's offense may be a little more with it than Penn State's was, so that'll be fun. But no, I mean, yeah, I wish you could have been a fly on the wall when Oregon got that interception, man. I was already pacing. I was already standing 3 feet from the TV, my hands on my hips, crossing my arms, pacing back and forth. Like I was just like, come on, defense, get that one stop. Drew Aller hadn't turned the ball over once all game. I was actually going to text you guys, like, watch this Drew Aller pick, but I didn't text it. And then it happened. And I ran around my house. Like, I pretty much ran outside.
Like, Alex, I got news for you. People that aren't nervous don't do that.
What are you talking about? It was the excitement. It was the adrenaline of such a great game.
You said you were pacing. People that aren't nervous, they sit down relaxed on the couch.
Oh, like, wow.
You should have saw me during the Rose Bowl last year.
Well, you guys were up a lot, so there's nothing to pace about. I know for a fact that the Oregon-Ohio State game last year, you were pacing at Austin. I know you were pacing on that one.
No, absolutely.
But, hey, that is the recap for last week's games. Obviously, we have a couple more topics to go over. Next up is, of course, the new favorite segment, Cooked or Not. We went a little light this week on the Cooked or Not do because I knew we were going to be talking a lot about the recaps and the previews. I want to make sure we had plenty of time for those as well. So we're going to keep the grill nice and simple to just a meal for two this week. And we're going to start with, you know what, we just talked about the Ducks, Penn State, James Franklin not being able to win the big game. This game not necessarily being on James Franklin's shoulders. But James Franklin, we're going to throw him on the grill. And Bill, I'm going to start with you. Is Ben, I almost said Ben Franklin. Is Franklin cooked or not?
Ben Franklin been cooked. I'm gonna put him at medium. I'm gonna put him at medium, not necessarily because of what happened Saturday. I agree with Cottrell and both of you guys. I don't think necessarily what happened Saturday is on James Franklin. I think once they got into the game, I think they called a good game. Drew Aller just can't throw that ball. But I think as a collective, as a collection and a buildup of heat, he's been on here. I think he's been on and off this for so long. I think he's just built up to medium heat. I know Saturday is one you can't put on his, I wouldn't necessarily put on his shoulders, but there's a bunch of other ones that you can. And I think at some point, Penn State has to decide what they're okay with or what their standard is. I don't think that unless they're okay with going 10-2 or 9-3 every year and probably making the college football playoff or being right there, at some point they just have to be like, there's no more excuses. Like, you either got to get it done or you don't. They gave him a huge contract. I don't know what his buyout is. But I think with you look at Michigan's success, Ohio State won it last year. Oregon looks like they're going to consistently be in the mix now. I don't think Penn State can be okay with being the fifth team in the Big Ten. And if they are, then I guess let them stay there. But his record against the top 10, the top 5 is abysmal. It's abysmal. At some point, you got to hold them accountable. And at some point, you either got to get over the hump and win the big games and win the national championship or not, or just say, hey, we're happy to be here every year. And I think those are decisions the next year or two Penn State's going to have to make and make a decision on their head coach.
I'm going to go medium rare here. And the reason for it is, as much as it joy as it brings me to shit on James Franklin, I think their last 3 losses have actually not come on the shoulders of James Franklin. I think dating back to last year, the loss in the Big Ten championship game to Oregon, that wasn't, to me, it didn't feel like a James Franklin loss. Drew Aller had a couple bad turnovers in that game. Oregon's offense was absolutely humming in it. And, ultimately, I think the turnovers is what did Penn State in. They were playing from behind. Like, once they figured it out offensively, they were able to score a ton, on that Oregon defense. So I don't necessarily put that game on him. It's Drew Aller turnovers. Then you go to the college football playoff game against Notre Dame, and they're in a position to not just not lose the game, but they're in a position to go and win the football game. And what happens? Drew Aller gets a turnover. Notre Dame goes down. They kick the field goal. They win the football game. And then most recently, this game against Oregon, again, I thought James Franklin coached a pretty decent game. There wasn't a blunder that just stuck out directly there to me. And they go down, they score, they have the lead, and I get it. Oregon came down, they scored again to tie the game. But then you're down 6, and your senior quarterback, who is projected to be a first-round draft pick, goes and he throws another interception. I can't put it on James Franklin that these things happen. Now, is it on James the fact that they don't have Bo Pribula, or that they didn't tell Drew, hey, as much as we want you to come back, you won't have a job here if you come back next year. Like, you're going to have to go the Carson Beck route and go to Miami or go somewhere else to, be a starting quarterback if you want to come back to college. Sure, I think part of that could go on James, but at the same time, like, I would think that I want my senior quarterback to not make these mistakes. And yes, Justin, I gave the rating. I want medium rare here because I don't believe that the last 3 big-time losses have actually come on the shoulders of James Franklin. Has he cost his team a ton of games in the past? Absolutely. But I think as of late, he hasn't looked afraid of the moment. I think his quarterback has just time after time let him down. But on the flip side of it, though, what other option do you have? You can't bench Drew Aller at this point. Like it's not an option. Like you have to get him to learn from his mistakes, but he just keeps making them.
Bet they wish that Bo Perbula would have stayed. I bet they're wishing Drew Aller would have gone to the draft last year. Look, man, I gotta put James Franklin at medium. Yes, the last 3 games, we found a great way to kind of put it on maybe Drew Aller's shoulders more than James Franklin in these losses. But I can't ignore the overall record against top 10 teams of 4-21. He is dominated by these teams that are top 10. Even just against ranked opponents, he's 15-29. The rest of the time, he's 104-32 as overall record in his 12 seasons at Penn State. So like the guy knows how to win, but he can't win the big moments. And Penn State, just like Bill said, Penn State needs to decide what they are okay with settling with. Are they okay with settling maybe for 9-win seasons, or do they want to be where Ohio State is at, where Oregon is going towards, where Michigan just was? Like, does Penn State want to be that 4th, 5th, 6th best team in the Big Ten for the next 20 years, or do they want to shake the boat? I think James Franklin has 1 year. I think Drew Aller leaves this season. I think he has 1 more year. If he can't find a way to win a big-time game in the next year and a half, James Franklin's going to be looking at the unemployment line. And like I said,
I think James Franklin is a really good coach. I think he's a great recruiter. I don't think he's necessarily as good as a like a Dan Lanning or even a Ryan Day or Harbaugh was at developing his players. And I don't think he's a great coach. And I think you need to be a great coach. I mean, I don't think you could look back at the last 10, 12 years and say any coach that won the national championship wasn't a great coach. And I don't think he's a great coach. I think he's a very good coach. And I think that's the line. And I think Penn State is deserving of a great coach. I think it's a great program. It's a great job. I don't think they have any problem getting a big name if they decide to move on from James Franklin.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Penn State has the notoriety, the history that they can still get those big recruits. And James Franklin, like you said, is a great recruiter. I just don't know. Like I said, eventually, if you don't, like I said, if I have my job and I have a sales goal and I never hit my sales goal, eventually my boss is going to want somebody that's going to hit that goal. And James Franklin's had 12 seasons last season got into the college football playoff, but I felt like their Penn State team was better than the Notre Dame team they lost to. I thought Penn State had the opportunity to, especially with the path to the college football playoff championship they had last year, I felt like Penn State should have walked into that game against Ohio State. And they made it a harder path than it needed to be. So I think James Franklin's going to be medium. I think after next season, we could be looking at a new head coach at Penn State if he doesn't find a way to win a big game, win a Big Ten championship, or even make a national championship. I think James Franklin's going to be looking for employment elsewhere. So I got him at medium right now. Next up on the list, we're going to the West Coast. I almost said Lane Kiffin, but that is Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley at USC. Obviously, they had a great game against Illinois this last week, where they ultimately lost by 2 points. USC, I feel like, has really underachieved. I feel like every single year his record is getting worse and worse. His first year at USC was still in the Pac-12. He won the Pac-12 championship, went 11-2, 9-4 the next year. What was it, 8-5 the year after that, or 7-5 or something like that? Like, he's just regressing. He's underperforming with a lot of talent and a lot of money given to him. And what do you guys think?
For me, this is easy. I'm going to go medium well, and it has nothing to do with the game that happened yesterday. I think as a whole, you talk about Lincoln Riley. I think that you had Caleb Williams at USC, and he wins a Heisman. He goes number 1 overall. He's the consensus number 1. Like, people dubbed him a generational talent. You don't make the college football playoff with him. And then following it up, you don't have a replacement ready. So you tried to go the Miller Moss route last year, and clearly he wasn't the guy for you. You go the Maeva route, you get him out of the portal. He's not going to be there forever. And even still, like, you can't win games against Illinois. And that's not to talk about, games against Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan. Like, there's at some point you have to have a standard at that USC school who knows what it's like to win. Like, we're a long ways away from the Pete Carroll days at USC. And I think they thought Lincoln Riley would be that guy to come in, bring the stars to USC, get the top prospects. I mean, his list of quarterbacks that he had while he was at Oklahoma is absolutely incredible. So maybe, USC thought they were going to have that version of Lincoln come in, and they could also have the NIL money to get in all the other pieces around whatever, Lincoln makes of the quarterback situation. But that hasn't been the case there. And I think at some point, USC is not going to be okay with being ranked 25, 24. 9 wins is nice. 8 wins is nice. USC is one of the top 15 programs in college football right now. And at some point, it's not going to cut it. So I'm going to go medium well here, just because I think it's not just about what's happened this year. It's about, as a whole, in the Lincoln Riley era, you haven't gone to the college football playoff one time. That's not what we brought you in here for. We got to get that turned around.
I'm going to go medium well, and I don't think Cottrell could have said it any better. I will say, to agree with him, I don't think it really has much to do about this year. I think this year could be the nail in the coffin, though. I think it's about the collective of what's happened, the progress that hasn't been made, and the fact that if you're Lincoln Riley and you've been recruiting as well as you have, this program should have turned the corner already. The expectations were probably, I don't know if they could be any higher for a coach when they brought him in and got him out of Nebraska. I know we all talked about it when it happened, that we were like, damn, like, it's a big hire for USC with all the resources they have and the way, they can recruit in California. Like, Lincoln Riley's probably going to be a problem in USC. He's been anything but. The defense is not – they're on their third defensive coordinator. They've not gotten any better. The offense scores points, but, I mean, they're still losing games. I mean, we mentioned Caleb Williams earlier in the show. They went 8-4. Another, I don't want to say big loss, because if to USC standards, the Illinois game shouldn't be a big game for USC. It should be like, hey, we're going to go to Illinois, smash them, come home and rest, and get ready for Michigan to come to town. And they went to Illinois and lost. These are not the expectations. These are not the standards of that program. And again, you're talking about an all-time top 10, top 12 program in USC that has a bunch of history, a bunch of championships, a bunch of accolades, Heisman winners. This is not what USC signed for. This is not what USC paid a shit ton of money for. I'm close to going well done, because I think if he doesn't, I don't think if they finish the year this year well, I think there's a chance they fire him. I really do. So I'll leave him medium well, but I think Cottrell hit every point on the head for me, and literally everything I have written down, he nailed every single one of them. He's been underwhelming, he's underachieved, and he's been nothing but disappointing so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, and according to Justin, Lincoln Riley was cooked from birth, because he's got a first name as a last name and a last name as a first name. So, he's been cooked since birth, so I get it. No, I think that you guys bring up both very good points. I think that Lincoln Riley, he's like I said, if he had been progressing through these seasons, I think, and we were seeing positive changes every single year, I think that he'd be fine. But every single year, his record's getting worse and worse. It feels like, his defense is an issue. That gets fixed, but then it still rears its ugly head again with the defense lets down, and they end up in a high-scoring affair. I think Lincoln Riley is going to, like I said, just like James Franklin, I think he does have another year still. But just like Justin said, UCLA just fired their head coach. You got your neighbor school already kind of in the realm of looking for their next head coach. Like, how much faith do you have in Lincoln Riley, where do you risk waiting another year to go find another coach, or do you want to jump into that pool with UCLA, with Virginia Tech, and kind of see who's out there, who's available, who you can get?
I tell you what, I tell you who my first call would be if things go the way that they've been going.
Hold on, let me guess. You're gonna say Deion Sanders.
No,
I'm just kidding.
That's a bad fit in my opinion.
My first call would be going over to Indiana and Kirk Cignetti, because Indiana is a nice job and he's turned them around.
It ain't USC.
USC is a 1,000% better job. Like that would be literally my first call, and like I could look at Kirk Cignetti as my coach of the future, because USC is one of those jobs where there's like 4 or 5 maybe schools that could call you and lure you away from USC. But if you get USC back as a top program, like even then, you don't even listen to some of those calls there. Like I think Cignetti could be your full long-term answer there. And he's proven to have success wherever he's been. So
I think he would be a little bit of a risk, but I don't disagree with you, because I think he would be, to some degree, I think he's the culture change they need there. A little bit more kind of a hard ass type guy, but I think as long as you felt comfortable enough that you think he could recruit there, he's not a bad choice. And I agree with you. If you're not at a handful of schools, if USC calls, you have to pick up the phone. Not saying you got to go, but you can't. There's only a handful of guys that realistically could be like, I don't want to talk to them. And it's a real short list. So he's an interesting name. Hate to say it for Alex, but you know you're not landing, but you know your OC is going to be on that list probably.
USC is a much more intriguing job offer than UCLA. And we had talked about him being a UCLA possible fit. But honestly, what about Ed? I want to see Ed Orgeron in Southern California. I want to see him with his accent in Southern California.
He'll never make it. He'll never with the way he is with women, with all the women in Southern California, he'll never make it to practice.
Anyway,
he'll be chasing girls all over campus. He'll make it a week before he's got a complaint against him.
Get Urban Meyer out of retirement.
No, that ain't happening here.
Anyway, that was our segment of Cooked or Not. We got 17 minutes till kickoff, which means there's only one thing left for us to do. And that's, it says week 5, but it's week 6, games of the week. Bill, where are we headed? Where are we headed to start this preview session off?
Let's start. We'll start with Iowa State and Cincinnati. Which as good as Iowa State's played this year, I believe they're a 1.5 underdog at Cincinnati.
Well, they lost both their starting
corners.
Yeah, both their starting corners are out. So I think they're just not really sure what to expect of the Iowa State secondary, which has been really one of the focal points of their team this year. They look great against Kansas State and Avery Johnson, and really they've, like I said, held down that back end. So losing both of them at this point in the season, obviously Iowa State I think is a better talent than Cincinnati, and I still think Iowa State wins this game. But with the question marks around what that secondary is going to look like, a couple young guys without a lot of playing experience, I think this could be a lot closer of a game than it would normally be if they were at full strength.
It's crazy though, because I swear this feels like we're in a glitch in the matrix. Like I feel like this is exactly what happened to Iowa State last year. Like they were in a weird game and they lost 2 DVs and they were not expected to win, and then they went out and won by like 30. I don't remember who they played last year, but I definitely remember like this being a story from last season. So it's crazy that it's happened again, and especially with Iowa State having the success that they've had so far, still being undefeated.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's going to be a tougher game. I guess Cincinnati is always, pretty tough at home, but I still feel like Iowa State should have enough to get through this game, but I guess we'll see. I mean, It would be a shame to see Iowa State start kind of get thrown away due to injury. Are they both out long term or just this week?
I think both of them are season.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's got to grow up quick. Need two of them. Play a lot of zone and protect them, and hope your front seven get home.
I was just checking really quick. Jontez Williams and Jeremiah Cooper are both out for the season.
Yikes.
Yep.
I'll still say Iowa State pulls it out. I think they have enough veteran leadership, especially with offense with Rocco. I think they'll get it done. I mean, I think this hurts them long term in terms of possible Big 12 championship aspirations, but I don't think today's the day.
I think Iowa State's faced enough adversity. Well, I guess I wouldn't say adversity, but for example, to start this season off, I was a very vocal criticizer about what their offense would look like without their 2-star wide receivers from last year, and the offense doesn't seem to have skipped a beat. So I'm going to kind of err on the side of positivity with this one, and that's why I'm picking Iowa State to win. Is I'm going to trust that Coach Campbell has gotten his backups ready for this game. I do believe that they have a good defensive strategy that is going to allow them to not be necessarily put on an island too much today against Cincinnati. And I don't think Cincinnati has the wide receiver threats that other Big 12 teams do, like Baylor or even Colorado's got some wide receiver threats. So I don't think that Cincinnati has the talent wide receiver necessarily to where they should be too concerned about this being the first start for a couple of their quarterbacks. I think that Rocco Beck and company control the clock. Even on the road, I think they're able to take care of business. And 1.5-point underdogs, I think Iowa State wins this game outright. I'm excited. Even though they are out 2 cornerbacks, I'm still shocked that they're underdogs on this game, even being on the road.
I'm rolling with Iowa State here as well. I think the big thing is the quarterback play. And you mentioned Rocco back there. Even if you get in a spot where Cincinnati puts up a ton of points, Iowa State's offense is built to be able to fire back, especially against the Cincinnati defense there. So I think regardless if Rocco knows that I got to go in, put up 30 points to win this one, that's what that offense should do. I think Matt Campbell will make sure they come in with a good game plan for Cincinnati. And on the flip side of it, you talk about their receivers. I think as much as I like Brendan Sorensby, quarterback for Cincinnati, he's not a guy that's going to run up the box score with throwing passing yards. So I think ultimately Iowa State, this is I don't want to say a good matchup to figure out who's playing corner for you moving forward there, but I think as long as the offense comes in with that right mindset and Rocco knows, hey, this game may be on my shoulders, I expect Iowa State to come out with a win.
That's 3 Iowa State. We have a lot of faith in Matt Campbell and the boys. So let's go right to the left there. Texas Tech at Houston. I think Houston's been a little, I would say underwhelming. I think a lot of people had them as dark horse this year in the Big 12.
They're undefeated.
What?
They're undefeated.
I know, but they're not playing great.
They beat Oregon State by 3 last week, and Oregon State is 0-5 this season. It's just, I know what Bill's saying. They're undefeated, but they haven't won convincingly. And he said they beat Colorado by 16, but it didn't really look like a 16-point win. They played SF Austin and Rice, and then Oregon State. So they really haven't played a lot of tough competition this season, which is, I think, what Bill means by
unconvincing for me so far. Let's put it that way. And then you have the Red Raiders, who I think a lot of people thought were going to be better this year. Cottrell definitely being one of them, but still probably a year away with the recruiting and the transfer portal haul they have for next year. But they're here. They're here, ranked number 11. Playing behind a really good defense and a pretty efficient offense. A little bit of a tricky game, I think. Again, I think Houston will get up for this, but I think Texas Tech is one of those teams riding the momentum right now and playing really well. I think if they can go into Houston and have a clean game today, just kind of do their thing and play their type of ball, I think they come out with a win. So I'm gonna go with Texas Tech.
I'm going to look at mutual opponents right now, and this is going to tell you everything that you need to know. Houston against Oregon State, 27-24. Texas Tech versus Oregon State, 45-14. Texas Tech's offense is absolutely, and yes, Texas Tech was home Houston was on the road. So, yes, there's a little bit of disparity there. But Texas Tech is a whole nother animal. And I love Connor Wegman. I think that he's fits in perfectly with that Houston offense. I think he found his home. I'm glad that he's playing well this season. But Texas Tech is going to absolutely own this game, even on the road. I think Texas Tech, it said it was the 12.5 point favorites in this game. I think this game gets up to 3 scores. I think Houston maybe looks good to start off the game, being at home, a little bit of momentum going. But I think Texas Tech shuts that down real fast and dominates the second half. And I don't know if Houston finds the end zone in the second half. So I think it's going to be a 3-score game. Texas Tech covers.
Look, you guys can say underwhelming all you want to with Houston. I think Connor Wegman has looked really good so far at the beginning of this season here. And he's been a dual threat quarterback, something that we didn't see while he was at A&M. While I don't think that'll be an issue, Texas Tech, a couple of weeks ago played Utah, and we know Dan Pierce dual threat quarterback, and they did a great job of shutting him down. So I still think Texas Tech is going to be my favorite, to win this game here, and I expect them to win. The one thing with them, though, is that you got to remember that their quarterback, Barry Morton, is coming off of that neck injury that knocked him out of that Utah game. He is expected to play today, but we don't know what he's going to look like. I think Texas Tech is a school that will have confidence in their backup, Will Hammond, because we saw what he did in that game there. But it always does give me some concern when quarterbacks are coming back from injury, or you have that backup that's right behind you that had a phenomenal game, because now you're looking over your shoulder like, I can't make the mistake here. Like, I'm curious to see the mentality of what that Texas Tech offense will look like with Morton, again, being under center there. So I think they have enough to ultimately get it done against Houston, because their defense is really good, and they showed that a couple weeks ago against Utah. But the offense is something that I am very curious to see in this game here later today.
All right. So we all think Texas Tech's going to win.
Yeah.
All right. Top right. One of the intriguing matchups from last year, coming off one of the biggest upsets ever last year. Alabama went to Vanderbilt last year, went into Nashville, took the L. And then the students took everything out of the stadium and walked it down Broadway, including the goalpost. Walked it all the way down Broadway and dumped it in the river. One of the coolest things that happened in college football last year. Revenge game today for Bama. Not something we usually say, because they usually don't lose too many people. Coming off that big win in Georgia at home, Tuscaloosa, against Vanderbilt, who is not obviously going to sneak up on anybody this year. Coming off last year, ranked 16th this year. I really like Bama in this game. And usually I err on the side of caution in these when you come off a big game and you have a letdown game the next week. I'm not looking at it this way. Again, we talked about the Georgia game earlier. I think if you're counting the board, there's a lot to point at and keep these guys motivated and say, hey, we got out of, big win in Georgia, but we got lucky to get out of there with what we got out of there with. Keep them focused kind of on the revenge tour type mindset with Vanderbilt coming to town. I think they handle business today. I like Alabama to win.
Well, here's the thing. Vanderbilt, Alabama, obviously both teams being ranked is absolutely shocking. I never thought we'd have Vanderbilt as one of our teams for games of the week. But here we are. Here we are in a world of Diego Pavia. It's Diego Pavia's world, and we're just living in it. Look, here's the thing. Alabama is 12.5-point favorites in this game. Vanderbilt is going to feel disrespected. Diego Pavia is absolutely killing it, dual threat, leading the team in passing, obviously leading the team in rushing as well. Coming into to face Alabama at home, Vanderbilt, obviously Nick Saban last year making comments about guaranteeing, like every time you go to Vanderbilt, you're guaranteed to walk out with a W, and they took that personally and upset Alabama last year. Vanderbilt's going to take that same energy into today's game as 12.5-point underdogs, as an undefeated Vanderbilt team who's actually ranked in the top 20. And they're gonna make Alabama fight for every inch they get this game. Every single pass completion is going to be contested. Every single throw is going to be Vanderbilt's defense is going to be swarming to. I'm excited for this game, not because of Vanderbilt being ranked and this being like I said, a big time matchup. I'm excited for this game to see Kalen DeBoer lose to Vanderbilt again. And that's what I'm picking. Vanderbilt's going to cover. I have Vanderbilt winning this game. I think Diego Pavia is going to put Vanderbilt on his back and take care of business in Alabama, because Alabama is still who I think they are, and that is not a top 12 team. And that is not a team worthy of the college football playoff. And Vanderbilt is going to make some noise in the SEC, and Vanderbilt's going to move to 6-0 today. And that's probably my upset of the week, upset of the day. Vanderbilt is going to take down Alabama today behind Diego Pavia's dual threat capabilities. I think he throws for over 200 yards. I think he runs for another 75. I think, like I said, I've said this multiple times, the dual threat quarterbacks are the equalizer in games like this, because you never know. Even when you have every wide receiver covered, everything is boxed in. The second he gets out from around his lineman, who knows what he's going to do? He's got the arm talent to sling it anywhere on the field, and he's got the legs to be able to run for those few yards to get the extra first down and continue drives. So I think this is going to be the Diego Pavia show tonight, and I think Vanderbilt takes care of business.
So the one thing that you have to remember about this game is that when you think about it from last year, it was a very similar spot. Alabama was coming off of a huge win over Georgia at home, though, last year. And that was the game where it was just fireworks after fireworks. You had the Ryan Williams touchdown. You had Carson Beck followed up with the touchdown. And then the following week, they had to go on the road to an unranked Vanderbilt team who had looked better, but Nick Saban said it on the pregame show. You know, whenever you face Vanderbilt, it's an automatic win built in the schedule. I think that Bama they never even blinked at seeing Vanderbilt last year. They were like, we're going to go into this game. We can have a C- game and win, and we're going to just go from there. And it took them getting punched in the mouth for 3 quarters to wake up, because after that, they did wake up. I mean, they ultimately scored, I believe they scored 40 points in that one, and they lost. I think it was 45-40 how it ended, or 40-35, something like that. It was a super high-scoring game, and they ultimately ended up losing the game there. But the difference is that Vanderbilt is ranked now. Vanderbilt beat them last year. So they know that we still have to come in and play a really good game against this Vanderbilt team, or they will beat us again. I think a lot of those kids that are on this Bama team, they played last year. They know what that loss felt like. And I think it would be different if this was a Vandy team that didn't beat them last year. As much as we talk about like look ahead games or let down games, things like that, I think this is the game that was circled on their calendar. Obviously, you always have to get up for Bama versus Georgia, but I think this is the one where they said, hey, we need to make sure we avenge last season's loss here. We need to come into this game super focused. And not even just that, I think seeing the spread the way that it is, I think Vegas knows that Alabama is going to go out here and try to prove a point. So I like Alabama in this one. I think they absolutely put it on Vanderbilt. Alex, you talk about this being your upset of the week, and you got Vandy outright. I actually like Bama to cover that 12.5-point spread here today and take care of business. So I'm all over Bama in this one. I think this is their Super Bowl.
I agree. So
Vanderbilt is Alabama's Super Bowl. That's crazy. That's a crazy thing to say.
Revenge tours are wild, bro. They're wild.
Yeah, but Vanderbilt is playing with house money. Like, they got nothing to lose. Like, they beat Bama last year. They're going on the road to Bama. They're literally playing free.
The element of surprise no longer being a thing, though, is
they ain't sneaking up on anybody this year.
They're an SEC program. They should never be sneaking up.
Bro, Vanderbilt stunk for 25 years.
When you get Nick Saban to go on TV and publicly admit that they just didn't prep for the game correctly because they were just like, that's a
Vanderbilt.
Yeah. Like, bro, come on.
10 years from now, we're going to be talking about the Nick Saban curse and how that comment about Vanderbilt being a guaranteed win, that comment is going to haunt Alabama.
Well, we won't have to talk about it for long because who's their coach? Eli, I forget his last name, but he won't be there for for much longer.
All right,
he's going to do exactly what Franklin did. Get it, prove you do something at a school you're not supposed to, and then cash in and get the hell out of there. Last one. old school rivalry game. I'm glad that it's back to this level. It's good for college football. Florida State and Miami are both good. It's good for college football. The old versions of wide right are back. Number 4 Miami, Carson back. They've looked good. You gotta give them credit where credit's due. Tip the cap to them. They've been clean. They've played efficient. Going to Florida State, who opened everybody's eyes this year right off the bat, destroyed Alabama at home in Tallahassee. Has an unfortunate slip up on the road to Virginia, who is now ranked. Didn't play good. Virginia, again, I think Virginia played a great football game, but they're going to be back home, coming off a loss. I don't think you could underestimate Doak Campbell and that atmosphere. We saw it in the Alabama game. This is a tough game to pick. It really is, because I think Miami has the capability to go in there and absolutely win and play a good game and not turn the ball over, play good defense behind Carson back. But I think Florida State is one of those teams that definitely plays with a different level of confidence and a different level of swag at home. Castellanos, we saw the attitude he played with against Alabama. I think they're going to be ready. And again, it's kind of reminds me of the first week. They're 4.5-point dogs at home again. It's a big number, It's not as big, quite as big as it was against Alabama, but it's still kind of a big, disrespectful number. So I think it's going to be a great football game. I'm glad it's at night. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. Glad I'm not a fan, of either one of these teams. Just going to be able to sit back and watch the game for what it is. So I'm looking forward to it. How do you guys think it goes?
It all comes down to Thomas Castellanos and his quarterback play. Last week against Virginia, he had 2 of his 3 season interceptions in that game. So, and I think obviously without those, obviously we're talking about a top 10 Florida State team against a top 5 Miami team. So it really comes down to Thomas Castellanos, his decision-making, using his legs when he needs to, throwing the ball away when his wide receivers are not open, not forcing passes. I felt like he thought his team was the better team against Virginia, which I still think if they played 9 more times this year, Florida State would win 9 out of those the rest of the 9 games. But Thomas Castellanos trusted his talent, trusted his arm, and I think in a game like this, where you have pretty much equal talent on both sides of the ball, it comes down to who makes the best decisions. Carson Beck's obviously very experienced, big-time game experience at Georgia. He's played great at Miami so far this year. Carson Beck's kind of reintroduced himself to the country. Thomas Castellanos is still in the middle of his coming out party. He's averaging over 6 yards a carry. Like I said, besides last week, he's been making great decisions with the football. If he can get back to that, using his legs when he needs to, throwing the ball away, not getting himself into tough situations, getting the 3rd and short situations as well, I think, and especially being at home, I think Florida State should win this game. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of Miami's coach, Luigi Cristobal, and I think this is that game that Miami's at the end of it was like his left with their head scratched, like, oh, we should have won this game. What happened? And Thomas Castellanos finds a way in the 4th quarter to lead a Florida State team down the field and beat Miami. It's a 4.5-point spread for Miami. I think Florida State covers that, and I think this is a 1-possession, possibly even as little as a field goal game. But I think this game is decided in the 4th quarter. And if I was a betting man, which I am, I would put my money on Florida State coming out on top.
I like Florida State here as well. I think that I talked about Miami and giving them more credit this year, and they definitely surprised me. So I'll give them a ton of credit there. But as a whole, like just from what I've seen so far through the first 5 weeks of the season, I feel like Florida State's a better football team. And I think last week was the wake-up call for them. Again, I think just kind of what I said with Bama and Vanderbilt, a few minutes ago, I think Florida State is in a position where they had their wake-up call already. I think it would be different if Florida State was coming into this game undefeated and we didn't know what those flaws may potentially look like for them. I think it would be different if Castellanos didn't have those interceptions last week and didn't know what to potentially build off of there. So I think that'll be big time this week for Florida State. And I think as well, defensively, they have to figure it out. You give up 30 to a Virginia team, and Miami is a team that offensively has absolutely had it rolling. Carson Beck has played very well. They've gotten a lot of great play out of their receivers there as well. So you have to figure that out here. But ultimately in this game, I'm rolling with the quarterback that I trust more. I'm rolling with the coach that I trust more. So I like Thomas Castellanos in Florida State to get it done and take care of business in this big time matchup.
This game wouldn't be right unless it came down to a field goal. So that being said, I definitely like Florida State to cover. If they win outright, I'm not sure. I still think there's a very clear path for Miami to win this football game. But I still think it's close. Like I said, at home, in front of that crowd, Doe Campbell. I think Miami's up for a game tonight. So I think Florida State comes ready to play. And I would if I'm betting it, I would definitely take Florida State plus 4.5. So that's it for recaps
or
previews. Sorry, I'm almost as confused as Alex's graphics this morning.
Hey, now it's been a busy week.
We got Pick'em real quick, or do you want to Eliminator first? What do you want to do first?
Let's do the mountain.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do the mountain. No one's in the helipad this week. The losses last week. Obviously, Florida State probably should have been put in that helipad, but I didn't put them in there. Big match this week against Miami. Some teams are starting to separate themselves on the mountain a little bit. And last week, everyone was kind of even keel. Now we got some teams kind of showing the true colors and showing who the best team on the mountain is. So as you can see, Ohio State and Oregon pulling ahead a little bit. Obviously, Ole Miss pulling ahead in the SEC as they are 3-0 in SEC play right now. Every other team has only played one SEC game. Ole Miss is still has played 3 conference games so far this year. Obviously, Texas Tech's up a little bit. So is Miami and Georgia Tech, teams that have showed really high promise. But Oregon and Ohio State are definitely the leaders of the pack as far as making their way up the mountain. But what do y'all think?
I'm go with it. I think next week maybe we can introduce some teams. Now we got some movement on these top teams. Maybe we can get some teams back in base camp. I think they've recovered from their injuries, and depending on what happens this week, maybe you get a couple schools that get back to base.
All right, I'll have to take a look and see who's ready to come back to base camp. We'll discuss that further this week after some games. We'll have some
I also think, and I'm going to go over it and pick them. I also think we get our first tombstone next week. I think it's going to be officially time for a tombstone, and I can't wait.
I know exactly what your game you're picking.
Uh-oh.
I know exactly what game you're picking. Anyway, let's get to pick 'em. Speaking of pick 'em.
All right, so throw up the record here. Alex, you are leading the way so far, my man. I got a 3-0 week coming, so you better be on your P's and Q's this week.
I mean, you could go 3-0, and I could go 0-3. We'd still be tied.
For sure. But
that's not happening. That's not happening.
All right, I'm gonna run through my picks here real quick since I did them on Wednesday. It'll be super quick. So I got Georgia minus 20.5 versus Kentucky. I think Georgia bounce back game. Kentucky stinks. I think they run through Kentucky there. This is the game that I think we finally get our tombstone on. I like Baylor minus 6.5 at home versus Kansas State. Better football team. Kansas State lets everybody beat them. They had a big win last week against UCF, but I think Baylor is a much better football team here. They take care of business. They cover that spread, and we finally get the K-State tombstone that I've been begging for 3 weeks. Last game here, it's already been bet down, but I took this number on Wednesday. I like Texas minus 6.5 at Florida. I don't think Florida is that good. DJ Lagway has been struggling. He's been turning the ball over. And while Texas does still have their question marks on offense, I think they do enough to win this game double digits. So I like them to cover that 6.5-point spread. And then my super dog, as bad as they looked last week against Duke, I like Syracuse plus 17.5 at SMU. Reason I like that game is because me just blind looking at it, I thought that number would be much higher seeing their performance last week against a really bad Duke team. So for it to only be 17.5, Vegas in my mind gave me some hope for Syracuse to keep that game somewhat competitive and pick me up some more super dog points.
All right, I'll rip through mine as well. First game, Boise State at Notre Dame, 20.5. Boise State has just not been, I think, what a lot of people thought they were going to be this year. Notre Dame at home with that offense humming now. I think we'll cover this easily. I took Kentucky at Georgia as well. Georgia minus 20.5 at home, coming off the loss. Kentucky's been giving up a lot of big plays and a lot of yards to pretty much everybody they played. Georgia, angry coming off the loss. I think cleans it up today. I think Georgia wins big. Vanderbilt at Alabama. I already said I'm taking Alabama in the points. I think it's revenge tour time. And again, I don't think Vanderbilt's going to sneak up on anybody. I'm taking Alabama. And Superdog, last but not least, Arizona at home. We'll play a little bit better, but Oklahoma State actually showed some fight last week. There wasn't a ton of games to pick from this week, Superdog wise, so I'll roll with Oklahoma State again. Hopefully, they stang me a couple Superdog points out in the desert, out in Tucson.
All right, and we're going to wrap this up with my picks, and we're going to start with a game we did preview, Iowa State plus 1.5 at Cincinnati. I think Rocco Becht and company take care of business against Cincinnati and cover that spread and win the game. California, former Pac-12 school. I'm really high on California this season. They're playing Duke. However, Duke is traveling 3 time zones to the West Coast, and they're playing at 7:30 West Coast time, which is 10:30 for Duke's normal internal clocks. I think that just like teams going from the West to the East and playing the early games, I think this same exact thing will happen vice versa with Duke traveling to the West Coast. I think California covers the 2.5-point spread against them. Darian Mensah has been really kind of up and down this season, and I think that the Cal takes care of business at home against Duke. So take Cal in the points at 2.5. And then Oregon State plus 1.5 versus Appalachian State on the road. I think Malik Murphy and Oregon State gets their first win of the season today against Appalachian State. Oregon State improves their record to 1-5, and they cover that 1.5 points underdog spread. And then for Superdog, Bill, I agree with you. There was not a lot of games to pick from, but I feel very, very confident that Kent State plus 45.5 against a John Materialist Oklahoma is the right pick to go with. I have a feeling. I know Kent State sucks. Not shade at Cottrell, just facts. They're 1-3 on the season, but I do think that without John Material, Oklahoma's offense may start out a little bit slower. They may do a lot of more run plays early in the game, which limits possessions before opening up their offense in the second half. And if I can get even just 2 or 3 Superdog points, I will be a happy man. So I'm taking Kent State plus 45.5 at Oklahoma for my Superdog. Justin, Oregon State's getting their first win of the season this year, my man. So today, book it.
Alex, there's a reason why I didn't pick Kent State in that game, because I looked at it.
I know you did. I know you did. And I am so far in the lead, I was like, I'll just troll Cottrell and to get a Superdog pick out of the way.
Well, you're behind in Superdog.
He's in the lead by 1 week, like a third of the way through the season.
And he's behind in Superdog, so getting the 0 ball this week isn't going to help too much.
We'll see.
All right, gentlemen. Another absolutely great show. Really, I don't know where you guys are. It really feels like football here today. I'm excited. Some of the games already kicked, so let's get out of here. Any closing thoughts? I gotta go watch the Michigan game.
Kansas State up 7-0 against Baylor. Suck it.
Tombstone.
They started off nice. Good for them. Tombstone coming soon. Cincinnati is also up 7-0.
Ooh.
Avery Johnson, 31-yard touchdown run. That's all I'm saying.
Tombstone.
Avery for Heisman.
All right, Bill, you got anything?
I got nothing. Like I said, I'm excited. I'm early today. I don't gotta wait. I can watch the game and then sit back and watch the SEC games and in peace and not have any conflicts. So it's gonna be a good day of college football for me.
Cool. Well, gents, Bill, wish you luck today, and guess we'll be back next week.
Yes, sir. That's it, boys. Episode 6 signing out. See everybody next Saturday. Thank you, everybody who comes in. Justin Louder in the comments all day. Like, share, all that good stuff for us. Thank you. And we'll see you next week.